Give your type design a boost using dynamic text in Photoshop. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to use dynamic text to easily create better-looking titles. This video is being filmed in Photoshop 2026. Dynamic text is not currently an option for Photoshop Elements users. So first, let's prepare the workspace. Create a new 12-inch by 12-inch document at 300 pixels per inch with a white background. I've already done that here. Then press the letter D to reset the color chips to the default of black over white. So the first main thing we're going to do is create a type layer. Get the horizontal type tool, and in the tool options, open the font picker and choose a font, any font that you want. I'm going to use this font called Cal Sans. It's a font you can find for free from Google Fonts. This is normally where I would also tell you how to set things in the tool options like the size, the alignment, etc. But in this case, it doesn't really matter, and you'll see why in just a moment. But just in case your type tool is using a small font size, maybe use something at least like size 36 or bigger, or whatever it is that you can easily see on your screen. So then on the document, click once to place the cursor. Then type a phrase. I'm going to use the phrase, "I love you to the moon and back." And then once you're done typing in your phrase, you can click the check mark to commit. Now the next thing we're going to do is convert this type layer to dynamic text. Now in the tool options, this icon right here is what changes a type layer from a regular type layer to dynamic text. So we are going to click on that to turn it into a dynamic text layer. And in case it's hard to see, this is the icon that has a T with a lightning bolt next to it. Now you'll always know if your type layer is a dynamic layer by looking at the layers panel, and you'll see that now the thumbnail also has that same lightning bolt next to it. So now on the document, click once directly on the type layer to activate it. And you're going to notice that this dynamic text layer has a text box around it. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to click and drag in on any one of the corner handles to resize and shape my dynamic type layer. So you'll see here, once I start making it skinnier or whatever, then it'll keep going like that. So if you get it to where you like that, I kind of like how that looks. Then if you want to make it bigger, then you can stop and click and drag back out from a corner handle. And I think you can kind of see now what this is doing. So the wider you make it and the skinnier you make it, it will stack the words differently. So let's do something like that. And then we'll click the check mark to commit. I'm just going to move this to about the center of the document just so it's easier to see. But at this point, you're going to start to see how cool this dynamic text can be. As we go through this tutorial, we'll make some observations about how this works. The first observation is that dynamic text will automatically align or justify your words. So like you can see here that this makes a perfect rectangle every time you make a dynamic text layer. The letters are going to go from pixel to pixel on the edges all the way around. And that works really great for a scrapbook page. Like let's say you have a perfect rectangle space for a title. Now you can fit it there really easily and it looks really good. The second observation about this is that the shortest word will always be the tallest or the largest. So let me show you what I mean. So if I click and drag in on a corner handle until the word I is on its own line, you'll see that then the word I becomes really tall and large and everything else becomes really small. So then the next big shortest word is the word to. As I drag this out, and you'll see everything else is smaller and the word to is larger. So as I keep dragging out, you'll see now it just keeps like the smallest or the shortest words are going to look bigger. So we will keep doing this. That looks pretty good right there. I think that's about what I had before. And then I'll click the check mark to commit. So just keep in mind that the shortest words are not often the words that you want to be the largest, because they're usually words like I, to, the. So you don't want to make it too skinny unless you need to for some reason. But that's just something to observe, is that like as you click and drag the corner handles around to resize this to fit an area, just keep in mind that the shorter words are going to look bigger depending on how you set up the text box and the size of it. Now we're going to learn how to adjust the dynamic text with the Properties panel. So with this dynamic type layer still active in the Layers panel, in the menu bar, choose Window, Properties to open the Properties panel. In the Properties panel, now we're going to scroll down until we see Dynamic Text Options, which is right here. The first option gives you the option to adjust the spacing between the words. So that's this one here. And it gives you a drop-down box here that you can pick from different options. So if we say 0%, that's going to remove any spaces that you typed into the phrase, and all of the letters are going to be equally spaced apart no matter what. If we go back to 100%, then it'll go back to regular spacing according to how the font was created. So that's going to give you a lot of options that you can play with. You could equally space the letters apart, just, playing with the different percentages to see what it looks like. And always know that when you go back to 100%, it will go back to the default. The second option given is the spacing between lines of type. This is very similar to leading. If you set the percentage to 100%, the spacing between each line will be larger. If you set it back to 25%, it will be smaller and it'll be much closer together. So depending on the space you're trying to fill, you may need to increase this percentage a little bit. Now, I also want to show you that, like with all the Photoshop options, you can click and drag on the icon to make things smaller or bigger, and then it will adjust that accordingly. But I'm going to undo that. But you can do the same thing here too, where you can click and drag bigger, smaller, and then undo that. But I find the drop-down boxes easier to use just in general. The other thing about this Properties panel dynamic text is that what you set here is going to be for the entire type layer. You can't select one line of this type and only change that. It's going to affect the entire type layer no matter what you set it to here. And so if you need to make adjustments for just one line in the type layer, or spacing of some kind in just one of the spots here, then you can do that, but we have to do that in a different way. So that brings us to our next step, and that's learning how to adjust dynamic text using the Character panel. So in the menu bar, choose Window, Character to open the Character panel. So let's say you wanted to make the spacing between the last line of type and the line above it much larger than the spacing between the other lines. Maybe you have like an element you want to stick in there, or a picture or something else. You might have really good reasons for doing that. So to do something like that on the document, just click once directly on the type to activate it. Then we're going to click and drag to select the last row of the dynamic type. Now in the Characters panel, how to change the spacing between this line and the line above it is to set the baseline shift of the selected type to a -100. So we'll just put that in here, and you'll see that once we do that, it really drops this down. If you wanted to increase the spacing, you could go back to 0. You could increase it to a positive number, and that looks pretty close to what it was before. But you can just kind of play around with that baseline shift to move things up and down as needed. So I'm just going to cancel that because I don't want to make any changes actually. Now let's say you wanted the spacing between one set of words to be larger or smaller than the rest of the dynamic text. So to do that, on the document, click directly on the type to activate it. And then we're going to click and drag to select the space between the two words we want to change. In this case, I'll select the space between the words to and the. And then in the Character panel, you can change the tracking. I'm just going to change it to like 1,000 and see what it does. And right there, it gives me a much larger space in between those two words. Now that might be ideal because in this case, I I don't want to be like so big that they look bigger than the word moon, but then I also have this big gap here that looks kind of weird. So one of the things you could do is stick like an element in here. Maybe you have a moon element or a heart because it says I love you to the moon and back. So you could easily place something in this space and then it would look really cute and it would look purposeful. But if you just left this big gap there, that wouldn't look very good on its own. So just keep that in mind. But this is a great way to kind of manipulate the size of the type if you want to emphasize one word over the others. But I'm not going to worry too much about that right now, so I'm going to press Ctrl or Command Z to undo that change. Another thing you can do is make one part of the dynamic text a different font. It doesn't all have to be the same font. So to do this, on the document, click once directly on the type to activate it, then click and drag to select the letters or words that you wish to change the font for. So like I'm going to select the word moon because I want that to be a different font. Then in the tool options, click to open the font picker and choose a different font. For this one, I'm going to use the font called Send Flowers. It's another font that you can find for free at Google Fonts. Now, when I changed the font of the word moon, it resized the word to be much smaller, so now the word moon is not on one line by itself, but I can quickly fix that. So on the document, I'm going to click to place my cursor just in front of the word and then I'll press Enter or Return to advance the word to the next line. And that looks really good. So I can click the check mark to commit. But now you'll notice, once I've changed the font here, the spacing between to the and moon is a lot bigger than everything else, and I don't like how that looks. So to fix that, I will click once on the type, directly on the type to activate it. Then I'm going to click and drag to select the last two lines to highlight them and select them so that I can change their baseline height. So now on this, you can scrub using the mouse by clicking and dragging to the left or to the right. And I'm going to go to the right until it looks like it's close to matching the other lines. And then I'll click the check mark to commit. And that looks much better. Now I don't have this weird gap in there anymore. So those are the basics you need to know in order to use the dynamic text function to create your own awesome type layers. Here's a page where I used my dynamic type as a title. Being able to use dynamic text to help my title fit a specific size or shape is one of the coolest features about this. It's both quick and easy to do, and it helps your title have a designer look without having to spend hours on it. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to our channel. This has been Jennifer Juris with Digital Scrapper. We help you get your stories told.